My name is Elena. I was 29 years old when my family finally realized I wasn't the failure they had spent years whispering about. But the truth is I never planned to tell them. The night it all came out wasn't dramatic at first. It was supposed to be just another family dinner. The kind where I sat quietly, nodded politely, and let my older sister soak up all the praise like she always did. I had played that role my entire life. The invisible one. The she's doing fine, I guess daughter. I already knew how the night would end before I even walked through the door. The table was full. Laughter bounced off the walls. Glasses clinked, and then my mother did what she always did. She stood up, raised her glass, and turned my sister's latest achievement into a public performance. Everyone, she said proudly, I just want to say how proud I am of Marissa buying her first home, building a real future, doing things the right way. The room applauded. Then her eyes shifted to me. And you, Elena, she continued, smiling just a little too tightly. When are you finally going to settle down? The words landed the same way they always had, soft on the surface, sharp underneath. My sister didn't even wait. Yeah, Marissa added with a smirk. You can't float through life forever. At some point you have to grow up. Everyone laughed awkwardly. They always did. They expected me to laugh too. They didn't know I had a house key in my pocket. They didn't know I had been living a completely different life than the one they imagined. And they definitely didn't know that I had overheard something weeks earlier that changed how I saw my family forever. But this story didn't start at that dinner table. It started years ago, in a quiet neighborhood, where I learned very early that love in our house was conditional. My sister was the firstborn, the golden one, loud, charming, effortlessly admired. I was the other daughter, the quiet one, the one who didn't need much, the one who would be fine. When Marissa succeeded, it was celebrated. When I did, it was acknowledged briefly before being compared to her. I learned not to compete. I learned to disappear. By the time we were adults, the favoritism wasn't just emotional anymore. It was financial. Opportunities, help, support, those things flowed in one direction. And I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself independence was strength. What I didn't realize was how deeply that imbalance would eventually fracture everything. Because the night I accidentally overheard a conversation between my mother and my sister, I finally understood the truth they never wanted me to hear. And once you hear something like that, you can never unhear it. What I discovered that night didn't just explain my past, it set the stage for a confrontation my family was never prepared for. Growing up, I didn't need anyone to tell me who mattered more in our house. It was obvious in the smallest moments. The way my mother's voice soft when she spoke to Marissa. The way excuses were made for her mistakes, while my own were treated like personal flaws. Marissa was 4 years older. Confident. Loud. The kind of person who filled a room without trying. I was quieter. Observant. The kind of child who learned early that praise was rare, so I stopped expecting it. When Marissa won something, the house celebrated. When I did, it was acknowledged like a formality. Once, she won a local competition. There was a cake, balloons, relatives calling non-stop. That same year, I earned top honors in school. My mother glanced at the certificate and said, "That's nice," before reminding me to clean my room. It sounds small when you say it out loud, but when it happens again and again, year after year, it teaches you something dangerous. Don't ask for too much. By the time we were teenagers, the pattern had hardened. If Marissa needed money, it appeared. If she needed time, it was made. If she failed, it was blamed on circumstances. When I needed something, I was told I was strong enough to handle it on my own. My mother called it independence. I later learned it was abandonment disguised as praise. College made the difference impossible to ignore. Marissa stayed close to home, drifting between programs and plans. Tuition was covered. Rent was helped. Bills were quietly paid. Every change in direction was described as finding herself. When I told my parents I wanted to study something ambitious, my mother frowned and said, "That's expensive. Maybe aim lower." So I paid my own way. Scholarships, part-time jobs, long nights. I learned how to survive without safety nets because I didn't have a choice. And somewhere along the way, survival turned into discipline. Discipline turned into focus. Focus turned into momentum. But my family never saw that version of me. To them, I was still figuring things out. Still behind. Still the daughter who would eventually need help. And I let them believe it, because correcting them never changed anything until it did. The moment that cracked everything open happened years later. At a family gathering I almost didn't attend. I had stopped expecting fairness by then. I had stopped wanting approval, but I hadn't stopped caring. That night, I went inside to grab something from the kitchen. Voices carried from the next room. My mother's voice. Low, tense. "I don't know how you're going to manage this," she said. Marissa sighed. Papers rustled. "I just need a little help. Just this once." Those words, "just this once," made my stomach drop, because I had heard them my entire life. And suddenly, I realized they were never meant for me. What I overheard next didn't just reveal the truth, it showed me exactly how deep the betrayal really went. I froze where I stood, half hidden by the doorway, my heart suddenly loud in my ears. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but once you hear your name missing from a conversation where it should have mattered, you don't walk away. My mother's voice sounded tired. Not angry, not disappointed, just worn down. "You already have credit cards nearly maxed," she said. "There's the car payment, the loan, and now this house. I don't understand how you think this is going to work." Marissa exhaled sharply. "Everyone our age is buying. I can't be the only one left behind. People will talk." Silence stretched between them. Then my mother said something that changed the way I saw her forever. "I'll move some money around. Maybe dip into savings again? We'll figure it out." Again, my hands went cold. I thought about the time I asked for help with a security deposit years earlier. Just a few hundred. I remembered my mother's voice then, firm, almost proud. "You need to learn how to stand on your own. It builds character." Apparently, character had never been required of Marissa. "I just need help covering the closing costs," my sister continued. 10,000, maybe more if they don't waive the fees. "I'll pay you back once I get that promotion." The word promotion sounded hollow. Even then, my mother hesitated, then sighed. "I can put some of it on my card. Just until you're settled. Just until." I felt something snap, not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly. Like a final thread being cut. They weren't talking about emergencies. This wasn't survival. This was image management. My mother was willing to risk her future so my sister could look successful in front of people who didn't even matter. And I had been told my entire life that needing nothing was my virtue. I stepped back quietly before they saw me. When I returned to the room later, they were smiling again. The papers were gone. The performance resumed. That night, I drove home in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I opened my laptop. For the first time, I looked at my finances without minimizing them. Years of discipline, of saying no, of living below my means, while everyone assumed I was barely keeping up. The numbers stared back at me calmly, honestly. And for the first time, I realized something that made my chest tighten. I wasn't behind. I was ahead, and no one knew it. While my mother had been pouring money into keeping my sister afloat, I had been quietly building something solid. Something real. Something that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. The next few weeks passed in a blur of decisions. I never talked about meetings, calculations, walkthroughs. I didn't announce anything. I didn't hint. I didn't ask for advice. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about choosing myself. And the moment I held the keys in my hand, standing alone in a place that was entirely mine, I understood something with absolute clarity. The people who underestimated me were about to be very uncomfortable. I thought I could keep my new life private, but one holiday would force everything into the open. I didn't plan on telling anyone. That was the truth. My new place wasn't a secret. Out of fear, it was a boundary. For once, I had something that hadn't been filtered through comparison or judgment. But families like mine don't respect silence. They interpret it as weakness. The invitation came weeks later. A holiday dinner. At Marissa's new house. Of course it was. My mother's messages were full of pride, exclamation points, and reminders not to be late. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a victory lap. I almost didn't go. But something in me wanted to see it, to sit at that table one last time as the person they thought I was and leave it as someone else. The house was decorated like a magazine spread. Everything matched, everything looked expensive. Marissa greeted guests like a host on a stage, soaking in compliments. My mother floated around the kitchen, correcting details, explaining upgrades, making sure everyone understood how hard her daughter had worked for this. No one asked me much. A few polite questions, vague smiles. Someone commented that city rent must be stressful. I let them assume. Dinner was loud and warm and performative. Plates passed, glasses filled. Stories repeated. I stayed quiet, watching the familiar pattern unfold. Then my mother stood up. She raised her glass and smiled proudly at Marissa. "Buying this house is such a big milestone," she said. "This is what stability looks like." Applause followed. Then, without missing a beat, she turned toward me. "Your sister has built a real future," she said. "When are you finally going to settle down?" The room shifted. People leaned in. Someone laughed nervously. Marissa didn't hesitate. "Yeah," she added, smiling. "You can't rent forever." Something in me went very still. I set my fork down carefully. "I already settled," I said. A few people blinked. My mother frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I bought a house months ago," I continued calmly. 3 bedrooms, paid for it outright. Silence fell heavy and sudden. Marissa laughed first. "Okay. Sure." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I just sat there, letting the truth exist. My cousin spoke up quietly. "She's not joking. I've seen it." My mother's face drained of color. "You didn't tell us," she said sharply. "You never asked," I replied. Her mouth opened, then closed. The room felt tight, suffocating. "This is not the time for this," she snapped. "You're trying to steal attention." I met her eyes. "You asked." The tension cracked. Voices rose. Accusations flew. And then I said the thing I had held back for years. "I heard you," I said. "The night you offered to drain your savings so Marissa could afford this house." Everything stopped. Once the truth was out, there was no pretending anymore, and the fallout was immediate. The air at the table changed instantly. My sister's smile vanished. My mother stiffened like she'd been struck. No one spoke. But everyone was listening now. This wasn't celebration anymore. This was exposure. "I don't know what you think you heard," my mother said sharply, her voice suddenly too controlled. "But this is not appropriate." "It's appropriate," I replied evenly, "because it explains everything." Marissa leaned forward, eyes flashing. "You're twisting things. You don't know anything about my finances." "I know enough," I said. "Enough to understand why you needed help covering the closing costs. Enough to know why Mom keeps moving money around." My mother slammed her hand lightly on the table. "That is private. Family matters. Stay in the family." I let out a short, humorless breath. "Funny. When I asked for help years ago, you said independence builds character." No one laughed this time. Marissa scoffed. "So what? You think you're better than me now?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "No. I think I stopped pretending this was fair." Her face flushed. "You've always been jealous." "That's easier than admitting you were protected," I said quietly. My mother's voice cracked. "You're ruining this dinner." I shook my head. "You ruined it when you turned my life into a comparison and expected me to smile." Chairs shifted. Someone cleared their throat. No one stepped in. I stood up. "I didn't come here to compete," I said. "I came because I thought maybe this time things would be different." But they aren't. My mother looked stunned. "Sit down. We're not done talking." "I am," I replied. I picked up my bag. My hands were steady. My chest wasn't. But I didn't waver. "Behind me," Marissa snapped. "So you're just walking away?" "Yes," I said. "I've been walking alone my whole life. This is just the first time I'm doing it honestly." I left before anyone could stop me. Outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp and clean. My heartbeat slowed with every step away from the house. The noise behind the door faded, and with it, the weight I had carried for years. That night, I drove home to silence, to my space, to something that didn't require approval. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. What happened after that dinner proved that walking away doesn't end the story, it reveals it. The weeks after that dinner were quieter than I expected. No dramatic apologies, no heartfelt messages, just silence punctured occasionally by awkward attempts from relatives pretending nothing had happened. The family group chat went still. No updates, no praise, no celebrations. It was the calm that comes after something finally breaks. My mother called once. I let it ring. Then again, I listened to the voicemail later. Her voice was tight, rehearsed. "You didn't have to embarrass your sister like that. We're still a family." Family. The words sounded different now. Smaller, heavier. Another message followed days later. Softer this time. "We didn't know you felt this way." I didn't respond. Because here's the truth, they didn't want to hear. They did know. They just didn't care enough when it didn't inconvenience them. Through a cousin, I heard what happened next. The promotion Marissa was counting on never came. The debt caught up faster than expected. Payments were missed, stress showed. The house, the one that had been treated like a trophy, became a burden. Eventually, it went back on the market. My mother tried again after that. This time with apologies mixed into requests. "Your sister just needs a little help. You're doing well, you could spare something. We didn't mean to hurt you." I listened, calmly, fully. Then I said no. Not angrily, not emotionally, just clearly. I didn't build my life to rescue the same system that broke me. That was the last real conversation we had. I didn't block them out of spite. I created distance out of necessity. Fewer calls. No financial discussions. No comparisons. When boundaries were crossed, I stepped further back. And something unexpected happened. Peace settled in. I poured my energy into my work, into friendships that didn't require me to shrink, into mornings by the window, coffee in hand, looking out at a life no one handed me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I just wasn't performing. If there's anything my story proves, it's this. Being overlooked doesn't mean you lack value. Sometimes it means you were never meant to stay where you were ignored. You're allowed to stop explaining yourself. You're allowed to walk away without permission. And you're allowed to build a life so solid that silence becomes your loudest answer. I didn't win anything that night. I just finally chose myself. And that was enough.